Hello and welcome to the Phoenix 5 Info Show. I'm your host, Lieutenant Vince Lewis, coming to you once again from Phoenix Police Headquarters in beautiful downtown Phoenix. I'm solo today, but we have a very special guest. I would like to introduce to you Officer Mary Metheny. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hear you're a fan of the show.
Yes, I just saw my lieutenant here.
Yeah, we had
Big fan.
we had him on not too long ago. Okay, so it's March. We've got St. Patty's Day coming up.
Yes.
And I thought, what a natural opportunity for us to invite somebody who does DUI traffic enforcement, or at least a huge part of that, on to talk about all the different ways that you can avoid a DUI, namely not operating a motor vehicle while you're impaired, right?
Right.
There's too many reasons not to. But I want you to talk, we're going to back up a little bit, and I want you to tell us what your official job is and a little bit about what you do in a shift.
Sure. So I work with the traffic unit right now. I'm on our DUI squad. We're actually in a really exciting phase in our squad right now where we're transitioning from solely operating service as a DUI van into also enforcement. So the average shift for me, I come on, I've got my really cool ghost marked Explorer. I stock up with phlebotomy supplies. If there's nobody calling me, I go out, do some enforcement, try to find my own DUI, answer up help and patrol. But then a large component of my job is the post-arrest process, getting patrol subjects all their paperwork completed so that they can go 10-8.
Mm-hmm. 10-8 is back in service.
Back in service.
Okay, great. So I was talking about when I was in patrol. When I was in patrol, I would hit the street, and I would be out driving, typically at night. I would start to see cues or mannerisms of people on the roadway. Now, some of that stuff can be explained. Maybe somebody might be, may not be distracted, or, they got a bee loose in the car, or something might cause somebody to do things like weaving or speeding or, not signaling or, breaking off. And there's a lot of things that go on that may not necessarily be wrong in an isolated incident, but you take a look at cues of somebody's driving to determine whether or not you might have a suspicion to pull somebody over for impairment. So tell me about some of the things that you're looking for as a law enforcement officer in other drivers that might signal a possibility of impairment.
Sure. So as law enforcement, we're trained to look for various amounts of
like cues or signals?
Yeah, so NHTSA is the primary source of our information when it comes to detecting impaired drivers.
And NHTSA is an acronym, right?
Yes, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And in the manual, it does acknowledge that in the 3 phases, so you have the driving phase, vehicle in motion, personal contact, which is where you're talking to the driver, and then your final phase being pre-arrest screening, which is, okay, I've gotten them out of the car to do FSTs. They've acknowledged that you may not have all 3 of those components in each investigation. What we're talking about with your question would be more the vehicle in motion phase, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes that is somewhat absent, right? Patrol has seen an influx of calls where we get a subject passed out in a vehicle, or a lot of times we respond to a car crash where one of those driving behaviors has probably occurred, contributing to that. But in terms of proactive enforcement, you're doing traffic stops, you're trying to say, okay, is this something else or is this possible impairment? You kind of have to be open-minded during your stop, and each investigation could be an impaired driving investigation. Luckily for us, NHTSA has a list of 24 nighttime driving cues. Things such as judgment problems, vigilance problems, issues maintaining their proper lane position, things like that, that officers can always refer to help them determine whether or not somebody's driving impaired. So, like any investigation, totality of the circumstances.
Sure.
You have some concerning driving behavior. Now it's time to use your senses, your ears, your eyes. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you see? And that's kind of how reasonable suspicion can be developed, and it can turn into an impaired driving investigation. So totality of the circumstances, for sure. We love that phrase in law enforcement.
Yeah, right. Well, so you don't necessarily make the judgment right behind somebody who might, but let's just say they commit a civil traffic violation,
Sure.
a moving violation, but you also, within the time that you were watching whatever caught your attention, you've got a couple of different traffic violations. You decide you're going to pull them over.
Mhm.
You pull over, you make a contact. What now are the things that kind of tell you that you might be looking at a possible impairment?
Okay, so you have a moving violation, you walk up to the car, and you start to detect the odor of an alcoholic beverage. That's a very common indicator. Open containers in the vehicle, right? If you can see it in plain view when you're standing outside of the vehicle, that might be an indicator. Slurred speech is a very common alcohol indicator of people under influence of high amounts of alcohol. But there are some things that are more subtle that as law enforcement we should be training ourselves to look for, right? Fumbling with registration, providing inconsistent answers, making the officer repeat themselves because they don't understand. There's a variety of things that you could be looking for. As law enforcement, we can be friendly and just ask people, have you had any alcohol tonight? Where are you coming from? Things like that. If your spidey senses are tingling, which is kind of a colloquial term for you're starting to develop reasonable suspicion, I wouldn't be afraid to ask people because most people, they'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be honest. Yeah.
So we're gathering these cues and these observations. Let's just say that you more likely than not, in your professional opinion as law enforcement trained, specialized law enforcement officer, you've made the determination that this person more likely than not is impaired, but you're going to do some more investigation. What happens next after that contact?
Right. So moving on in our 3 phases, we have the vehicle in motion, which is your traffic violation. You have the personal contact that we just talked about, the odors, the slurred speech, the open container. Now we're talking about getting the individual out of the driver's seat and outside the car.
Which is legal.
Yes.
You can do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, there's a few reasons we could do that. One is the Supreme Court, Pennsylvania versus Mims. We can have a driver exit the vehicle. But if we have, up to that point, seen some of these cues of impairment, things that we're trained, that's validated by NHTSA these are post-op indicators, then absolutely you can have somebody exit. At this point, I'd always say get them to off the roadway if possible, a nice level, flat area with good lighting, preferably away from our flashers. And that's when you move into the field sobriety test.
Okay, is that the walk and turn, the stand and a point, and all that, the dance in the roadway?
So there's 3, the 3 most common field sobriety tests you're going to do roadside is the HGN test, which is horizontal gaze nystagmus.
That's with the eyes, right?
Yes.
Because eyes have a natural bounce to them, but that's alcohol or impairment could affect that. Do I have a good understanding of that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we could go down the rabbit hole with all the science behind it, but generally, yes. People under influence of alcohol will start to develop HGN at certain levels.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't make themselves have it. So it's, I tell people just because you're nervous doesn't mean you're going to give yourself HGN. That's not how that works. But not all officers are equipped with HGN. You have to go to the school to get that certification. So the 2 standard that all patrols should have under their belt is the walk and turn and the one-leg stand.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those tests are validated by NHTSA, that if you see a certain amount of cues on those tests, that the person likely is at a 0.08 blood alcohol concentration or higher.
Okay, and 0.08 is significant. Why?
So 0.08 is the presumptive legal limit in the state of Arizona.
So that's blood alcohol content. So that's like 8% of your blood is alcohol?
0.08.
Okay.
Yes. So if somebody's blood alcohol concentration is at a 0.08 or higher within the state of Arizona, then the state recognizes that as the presumptive level. You're presumed impaired at that point.
Okay.
You can get a DUI under a 0.08. Mm-hmm. And patrol might come across people that do the PBT and they're much lower, but they're very impaired. Maybe something else is on board. I think it's important for the public to know, people ask me, are we a zero tolerance state? Like, how does that work? And I explain, 0.08, that's the presumptive legal limit. But the courts recognize that you could be impaired all the way down to a 0.05.
And there's another, isn't it impaired to the slightest degree? Is that the other citation that goes along with it?
Yes, that's the base level.
Okay, so impaired to the slightest degree, impaired 0.08 or high or lower?
So there's impaired to slightest degree. The next would be at a 0.08 or higher, and then you get into your extreme DUIs, which you have the 0.15 or the 0.20 or higher.
Which is quite a bit.
Extreme.
This is a lot.
The state used a good word for it. Extreme.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then portable breath tests. Do you use those? Do you use a portable breath test machine?
Yes. So right now I'm kind of lucky. I have 2 preliminary breath tests. One is the one that most of patrol has, and the other one is one that we're kind of piloting. It's called a life lock. Make sure you get those calibrated. Those are not admissible typically in a DUI trial, a criminal trial, but they are great tools for law enforcement. One, to let your subject know where they're at, because sometimes they want to know. And then also when it comes to towing vehicles, knowing if you need to call a drug recognition expert out, or even just knowing if, okay, maybe they're to the point where you need to call the fire department to come evaluate them.
Yeah, which happens.
It does happen.
Scarily enough, you pull somebody out of a car
yes.
that necessarily shouldn't be out there. So, okay, so you've made the decision, you have probable cause, you make the arrest. What happens next?
Handcuffs go on, tell them they're under arrest for DUI, and now you need to start the DUI post-arrest process, right? So historically in Phoenix PD, that means, is there a DUI van working? Because, you know, the DUI vans are equipped with some things that most patrol may not have. But even if you don't have a DUI van available, what you need is a phlebotomist and a computer, okay?
Okay.
Phlebotomist and a computer.
Okay, so I know that this happens. Maybe not everybody's privy to this, but in the state of Arizona, with Phoenix Police at least, we used to be able to take any sample, blood, breath, or urine. I was always trained on the Intoxilyzer 5000. I think it was a breath sample thing. But we've evolved, right?
Yes.
And you are a certified phlebotomist, is that right? You can
yes.
take people's blood as a police officer, you can do that?
Yes.
Okay. What's that like? What was the training like for that?
So I think I was actually the first group to go through Gateway Community College. So I think it's about 7 to 8 weeks online, online school. And then at the end, your last week, you do a few days in person. You'll have an instructor there who's already a qualified phlebotomist. Ours was Lisa Hutchinson. She's amazing. And she's there to watch you, make sure that you're actually doing the phlebotomy procedures, you're applying them, doing them correctly. And then you have to get 50 successful draws.
Wow.
So that's what the program was when I went through. And then every 2 years, you have to do a recertification.
Wow. What could happen if police officers don't stop impaired drivers?
The biggest way to reduce impaired driving is deterrence, right? Detection and deterrence. Those
so stop before it even happens.
The 2 things that law enforcement wants to do. So obviously, there is deterrence in the don't let your friends drive drunk, you know, that sort of thing, call an Uber, rideshare. But there's also deterrence in the fact that if I drive through downtown Phoenix right now drunk, there is a strong chance that I'll get caught, right? Phoenix Police, from my understanding, you know, I see videos. We've been doing all sorts of different crime suppression efforts, finding impaired drivers and getting them off the roadway. That is crime suppression, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really unfortunate to see how many people lose their lives each year, whether it be children, families, officers, even when they're working, getting struck by impaired drivers, or the person themselves losing their life or becoming gravely injured. You know, we always talk about protecting and serving. Well, our roadways, I mean, it's our responsibility in Phoenix to keep the Phoenix roadways safe.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show and explaining all of that to us.
Of course.
Officer Mary Metheny, thank you for keeping the roadways safe out there with our DUI enforcement.
My pleasure.
I want to thank the crew for producing this, and thank you, the viewer. You can actually catch the video versions of these shows on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/phxpd. Just like to remind everybody out there that you too can help solve crime in your community by sending tips to Silent Witness. Visit silentwitness.org or call 480-WITNESS. We're on all social media platforms. Follow us. We are hiring. Go to joinphxpd.com. And remember, we're all in this together.